earlier presentation, we discussed about the critical path, which is of course the longest path, or it could be the shortest duration as well, can be the shortest duration at which the project is supposed to complete. So any delays on the activities which is there in the critical path will naturally delay the completion of the project. So it needs to be managed properly, and all the, if there are any risk which is attributed to that activity, need to be mitigated so that the project is always on the track. So from a definition perspective, a scheduled network analysis technique used to determine the amount of scheduling flexibility, that is the amount of load on various logical network path in the project schedule network, determine the minimum total project duration. So if you look at it, this is the critical path. The bottom one, it cannot be delayed at all. Whereas all this activity has some float. Float in the sense it can be started at different point of time. Again, after foundation complete, and even in the build walls, you can plan it in such a way that if it is okay to fix the facet after completing two tasks, you can still go ahead and do it. That is install facets and install fixtures. You can even complete, after completion of the build walls, then you can progress. If that is acceptable, you can do it, because that is not in the critical path. So those are called the float, because if you look at it as 40 days, and here you have about 9 days, so which means you have a buffer of about 30 days, which can be adjusted accordingly. So it is not on the critical path, so these are not critical task or activity as such. So that is the float. So the amount of time and activity can be delayed from early start without delaying the project. So that is the float. So you need to clearly understand this definition of float. So we'll progress further in the next presentation. Thank you. Now further discuss on the float as well as the critical path. There is something called forward pass, then there is a backward pass, and then positive float and the negative float. So we look at that. So forward pass is something like early start plus the duration minus 1, that is equal to the early finish, or early finish equal to early start plus duration minus 1. So let's take an example. So you have three activities, A, B, C. So something like A, again, this is from a software development perspective. Module A is related to coding, module B in another module of coding, and then both the things can be handled simultaneously by separate teams. And then you have an activity C, say testing. So testing can happen only after all the coding or development is done. Then you can start off with the coding. So let's now calculate the forward pass. So this is the how it needs to early start plus the duration minus 1. So early start in case of A will be 1, and B also is going to be 1. That is the earliest start on that particular day, plus the duration minus 1 equal to the early finish. So if you look at it, the first one, 1 plus 5 is the duration here, mentioned as 5 days here. So 1 plus 5 minus 1, so that is the early finish, is EF5. And similarly, if you calculate for B, because it is simultaneous, can be started on the same day. This can be started 1 plus 10, 11 minus 1, which is equal to 10. So, and finally for C, this needs to start on 11th day plus 15 days, 26 minus 1. So this is early start is 11 plus early finish is 25. So this is about the forward pass. So similarly, you need to calculate the backward pass so that we know what is the float available for each of the activity. So in case of backward pass, you need to start from the late dates. The backward pass calculates each activity late date. The late dates or the latest time an activity can start without delaying the end date of the project. The calculation with the latest early finish date without the successor. So this is the formula, that is late finish minus duration equal to the late start. So we have to come from reverse that is late finish minus duration plus 1 equal to the late start. So here the late finish, anyway, it is going to be 25. You are starting from the backward side, this side from C to B and B and A are simultaneous. Again, the reason is just to find which activity you can delay. I mean, it is not in the critical path. So that is the objective. So you have 25, that is the late finish, minus the duration, that is 15, then it is 10 plus 1. So that is where the late start, here it is indicated by ls equal to 11. So in this case, yeah, it is 10. 10 is the late finish, minus 5 plus 1, that is late start is 6. And similarly, it is 10 minus the duration plus 1. So this is late start is 1. So if you look at it, this one you still can has a float of about 4 days. I mean, it's about 5 days is what you have a flow. I mean you can actually delay this B little more. It need not start on the one. On day one, it need not start. It can be something, the B needs to start immediately because that takes 10 days. It has to start on day one, but you can delay it. You can, instead of one, it can start on the second day also, no harm. So even then it will complete, or you can start on the third day also, no harm. So you have a float of about, there is a float of about 5 days is what is there. So you can delay it, or you can engage fewer resources. So this is not actually, if you look at it, only this is in the critical path. B and C is in the critical path. A is not in the critical path. So which means you can delay it. The focus needs to be on B and C. A can be delayed. So slack is also called the float, is the amount of time a task can slip before it jumps into another task. So which means if you look at this one, you cannot delay it beyond 6, because 6 is what you need to start, because if you are going to delay it further, then instead of 10th day, it will start on the 11th day. So you can, that is what it said, the amount of time task can slip before it bumps into another task. Positive floats means that is more time available for an activity. So this activity, that is A, has a positive float. So you can, which means you can, just like that, little bit not focused, you can assign resources at a later point of time and still you can complete it. Negative float, if it is simply not available, meaning, say for example, you have something like this one, you have 10 days duration, but it so happens that you want to finish earlier than 10 days, you have only 5 days available. So that means A can complete, not an issue, but B, because the actual duration is 10, still if you want to complete within 5, that means there is a negative float, which means you need to crush the schedule, add multiple resource, or look at alternative ways in which this can be completed by the 6th day, 5th day itself, so that this one starts on the 6th day, that is C starts on the 6th day. This is common when there is a kind of an deadline set by the stakeholders that they want to ensure that the duration is compressed, so that some of the activity needs to be needs to be compressed so that it finishes earlier than what is actually initially planned. So naturally you need to look at the ways so that this activity completes, because there's a negative float, this activity is completes early, and then so that the subsequent activity is brought forward. This is also common in project scenario. So that is about the negative float. If there is something like the days are not available, though this task is going to take X amount of days, but you need to complete in X minus 1 days, you need to look out for an alternative so that the task is completed ahead of initial planned time. So naturally then you need to re-baseline it and then start working on the earned value analysis. So that's about the critical path, and it is very important concept in the project management. Thank you.